Jack just disappeared, but I guess he lives in our hearts. And I'd just like to thank him for that beautiful, beautiful practice, and what a way to start the day. I would also like to express my gratitude to Meng, who I haven't had a chance to hug yet, but virtually, and Cindy and Soren. I was lucky enough to actually be in a meeting room in Mountain View probably 15 months ago when those three individuals were conspiring to create this reality that we're experiencing today. So it was a real privilege for me to be there and for me to be here today and to watch the process unfold. And Rasmus, it's great to share the stage with you again. I've been fortunate enough to share the stage with Rasmus at various type of mindfulness and leadership conferences. This is the first time I get to interview him. So
scary.
That's a new spin, a new spin on things. But the Potential Project, you guys have been around for 8 years, trained 25,000 people in 25 countries, companies like Nike and Google and American Express. Can you share a little bit about what the journey has been like from 8 years ago, knocking on the doors of corporations and trying to get them interested in mindfulness, and where we stand today?
Absolutely, it's a very good question, and it's an interesting journey with a lot of changes for sure. I remember the first gig I had, I'd been practicing mindfulness back then for about 15, 17 years or so, and been teaching retreats all around the world, and had a background in the corporate space, had a research background as well, and I realized it's time to take this to organizations. And the first organization I actually got a gig with, we had the full day, and I was really excited because I thought, wow, I'm going to teach these people how to practice mindfulness and be happier and whatever. And we spent the whole morning. I put them to the practice, taught them the theory, really had a great morning with them. There was a lunch break, and after lunch I got back into the room. I was standing there waiting for them, but they never came back. And, and it's funny now, and it's okay you laugh about it. It was very painful back then. But what I realized was that if you wanted to take something perceived as individual, as personal, a bit fluffy, and bring into a hard-paced corporate reality, you really need to make a seamless integration. So I would say back then, the world was not ready for it, and certainly I was not ready for it. Nowadays, what we see is it's going very smooth. There's a lot of receptivity, especially in Australia and California, of course, but in North America, Europe, and Asia in general. So where it was very hard knocking doors just 5 years ago, nowadays it's more them knocking our doors, and that's a big difference. So there's a huge receptivity, and I think a big need now. People are starting to wake up. This is not a nice to have, it's a need to have.
And can you speak a little bit to what's actually changed? What has shifted within the executive and corporate space that they're knocking on your door?
I think it's coming from two sides. I think one is organizations and this whole conference, Wisdom 2.0. Technology has just evolved so fast, and the brains can't keep up. So I think what people are facing right now is what we call the paid reality, under pressure, always on, information overload, and distracted. That's what everyone is experiencing anywhere in the world, from industry to industry. So that's one of the main things, is there's such a bombardment of the attention of the mind that it's very hard for us to keep clear-minded, to keep focused, to keep calm at mind. So that's one thing. The other one is, I believe, Meng and other great people bringing this into the corporate space, and especially researchers like Dan yesterday and many other great researchers have helped provide a vocabulary around what is mindfulness. So it's not just a Buddhist thing from the East, but it's actually something that's very, very applicable in a hard-paced, hardcore business life.
Oh, thanks. And the theme of this dialogue, this interview, is performance, innovation, and mindfulness. And performance is clearly an orientation and a mindset and a requirement of corporate entities. And innovation and creativity, of course, are also essential to create the performance that's needed to sustain businesses. How do you interpret, how do you conceptualize the link between these concepts of performance and innovation, which have been traditionally anchored in the corporate space with mindfulness?
I think in general, mindfulness, there are many definitions of it. In a very simple definition, we say it's really about enhancing the potential of the mind to do whatever it has to do. So whether that's being performing or innovative. Maybe we share a story in terms of innovation, which is so crucial nowadays. The world is moving so fast. We need to keep up, and we need to find shortcuts. We need to find smarter ways of solving problems of yesterday. So we work a lot with Ogilvy, a very creative organization, of course, doing advertisement for most of the large companies around the world. And the founder of Ogilvy, David Ogilvy, he used to be walking around the streets of New York selling kitchen appliances. And he had this saying, sell or else. I mean, sell or you'll be out of business. And then he went into advertisement, created this global organization. But he kept that motto, sell or else. And that's very much the culture they have. They have to sell, they have to deliver, and they have to do it yesterday. So there's that sense of now culture. Everything has to be right now. They have clients calling them all the time, now. And just imagine being creative in a space where you're constantly one day behind. It's almost impossible because the mind is so much under pressure. So the work with Ogilvy is really about enhancing creativity by developing a mind that can be on task and then go off all the unnecessary clutter and noise of the paid reality so that you have the space to be creative in there. And I think mindfulness is just that basic practice spiced with a bit of best practice on how to develop creativity in an organization. It's a fantastic tool.
It reminds me of a teacher, Dr. Judith Orloff, once said, I was at a workshop that she was organizing, that the birthplace of creativity and innovation is silence. How does that resonate with you?
I think very well. Another great man from Apple, maybe someone knows him, Steve Jobs. He said something like, when you dive into that stillness, wonderful things happen and great ideas emerges. So it comes from stillness, from silence. That's where good ideas come from. And if we don't have that in an now culture, we can't be innovative.
We're here to talk about how mindfulness plays out in the corporate space. Based on your experience in dealing with, executives and HR managers, as well as just people living in the corporate world, how can we galvanize, how can we mobilize more corporate entities, more executives to adopt the principles of mindfulness?
That's a very good question, and I can come with maybe a few pointers to that, and then I'll send it back to you because you're basically asking yourself, I guess.
I'm supposed to be interviewing you.
Again, it's a very good question because mindfulness, as hip and hype as it is, it's still an alien thing to most corporates, except for in Silicon Valley, obviously. Another example, we worked a lot with a local law firm, Herbert Smith Freehills. Lawyers are by definition very, very skeptical, very, very cynical, very, very linear thinking, very, very left brain. Bringing mindfulness into and culture like that can seem like a challenge. And the way that we have found is very important when you go into those kind of industries is you need to be able to make a clear link between mindfulness and their business strategy. If there isn't that clear link, then lawyers or consultants or doctors or whatever in the C-suite, they just won't buy into it because business is about business and we should serve to the business. So linking to the business strategy is very important. Another thing that we have found is really important is creating a terminology, a language around it. So what is performance? What is stillness? What is focus? Creating a culture around those things, very, very important as well. And then creating sustainability. So in this law firm, they've created a whole terminology. They have linked it directly into not only their HR strategy, but also their business strategy. How do we become better lawyers? We do that by having really strong presence with our clients, obviously. You once told me sales has two components. There's the technical stuff, which you can learn from any textbook, and there's the individual, the personal, which is really about being present, because that creates trust. And then you have the relation and thereby the partnership. Yeah. So I think some of those are really important. But if I would ask you, because Lego, okay, so if you would go to Lego and say, we want to bring this in, what would they need for you?
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to be on the receiving end.
It's not a pitch.
But I could share with you how I've been introducing it, and I think we heard Dan reference it yesterday around one of the key dimensions of leadership and mindful leadership is role modeling. So I think first and foremost, what I've learned, sometimes the hard way, rather than proselytizing mindfulness, is simply trying to live, the values and the principles myself. And what I've discovered is that as a senior executive, I'm now running a team of 4,000 people. The impact that I could have merely by behavior and by presence to a large extent has greater significance than what I speak to about mindfulness. At the same time, it gives me a license to talk about mindfulness. And what I've discovered is the importance of getting executive buy-in versus these type of initiatives coming purely through HR or learning and development organizations. And at least on my personal path, I've debated and contemplated whether or not I could have a bigger impact on the organizations in which I work through HR and through learning and development and trying to scale these type of initiatives through that platform, or actually through being a commercially orientated executive. And I think it's given me a license by operating on the commercial side of the business, where people say, okay, this guy runs a big business, he knows what he's doing. And if this is if mindfulness is part of his package or his recipe of what can help the business commercially, then maybe I'll give it a try. Although some people refer to me as a hippie, although I don't feel like I look like a hippie.
Well, these ones I like. I don't know if you've noticed these. Can we have a camera on these? I mean, this is Lego. Of course, I'm from Denmark, so I love this. But this is Lego. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and a little plug. So, I get to be creative every day. I get to change the Lego on my cufflinks each and every morning, which connects me with the brand. Okay, let's talk about the world in which the leaders are operating today. And, a term that's thrown around is a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And there's a whole set of adaptive challenges that we as leaders are facing around globalization, around digitalization. The brick markets were hot 3-4 years ago, and huge amount of investments. Now, of course, a lot more challenges, China slowing down. So the complexity and the speed, it just seems to be ever increasing. What role can mindfulness play in supporting executives and their teams to deal with this context, which is not going to get any simpler moving forward?
Yeah, it's not getting simpler, it's not getting slower for sure. So either they quit or, I'll share another story. A finance director that we worked with in Europe, very, very, very busy guy, living in this VUCA world. Things were changing every day. He said he got about 150 emails every day. He had back-to-back meetings. This tough reality that most of you, I guess, will relate to. And he engaged in one of our programs, always long programs, because habit change takes time, mindfulness takes time, culture change takes time. So he engaged in a program that took 4 months of 10 sessions. And after that, I came and I asked him, so Jacob, what did you actually get out of this? You were very busy and you spent a lot of time on this. And he said something really peculiar. He said, I got 1 second And at first I thought, wow, that's not very good for business, getting 1 second for a 4-month investment. But what he said made a lot of sense. He said, before I felt like I was in reactivity, I was so busy that every time that something came in, whether email, text message, or an employee, or a leader, or whatever, I would just react. I would just do things. I was constantly on reactivity. I was on autopilot. And now he found that he got that 1 second of freedom in his mind to choose the most appropriate response to whatever situation it was. So rather than just responding to an email, just reacting to an email, he would think about it and maybe not respond at all. So getting that 1 second ahead, I think, is what the competitive advantage of mindfulness really is. We brought it into Carlsberg in talking about the VUCA world, large program. It was 3 years ago when it was going really bad in Russia. The ruble went down, meaning Carlsberg was in dire straits because that's where they sell most of their beers. They had cut down 1/3 of their workforce, and they had massive restructuring. And they brought us in on this large-scale program, and they had this focus of, we can't do everything, we have to do the right things. So they basically started utilizing mindfulness as a tool of getting a clear mind so that you can let aside all the clutter, all the noise, do the right things, not do everything, becoming a mindful organization. That's the way of dealing with the VUCA world, I guess. Mental clarity, that's the most appropriate answer.
I love that concept of 1 second, and it reminds me of Viktor Frankl's famous quote, between stimulus and response lies all of our power and freedom. And that power and freedom to make a choice of how we respond versus being compulsive, which many of us are much of the time.
Yeah, we liked it so much. We actually wrote a book about it. So
I look forward
coming
to
out
reading
very soon.
it. Very good. Mindfulness for many people, and traditionally, has been a very individual pursuit, and it's very much about the interiority of our world. And of course, some people practice within communities, but how can people cultivate this practice within a team environment? And how, within a team environment, within an organizational context, can it start to impact corporate culture?
I think it's very important to see, as you say, mindfulness not just as being an individual thing, because if it's just an individual thing, it's just for the individual, and it's good and it's great and will reduce stress and increase individual performance, and that's fine. But ideally, in my mind, mindfulness in a work-life setting should be some degree of disruptive. It should go in and rock the boat, make people see things in a different way, because as you say, it will get faster. World is getting faster, and we need to change our way of working. We can't keep on working harder, but we can start to work smarter. And in my mind, mindfulness has to be integrated in the organization, as we spoke about the business objectives, but also in the business culture, changing our ways of dealing with emails, not just individually, but how do we as an organization deal with emails? How do we conduct meetings? And I could even bring up great stories from when we worked with you guys at Google, how that started to change your ways of doing those. So I think ideally mindfulness is not an individual thing, but it's really a culture change program. That's how we see it. We're changing the culture, we're changing the organization by changing the individuals as groups.
Yeah, one thing I experienced during the program that we did together, and also the Search Inside Yourself that Maine conducted in Singapore, and then by introducing some of the practices into our team meetings, the first thing that I started to notice changing in the team environment and the team culture was people's capacity and willingness to learn, to listen to each other, and to move into a mindset of inquiry and interest and curiosity versus advocating a particular position. Is that something that you've seen in other organizations?
Very much so, and I guess it comes back to that 1 second. If you're mindful in a meeting, you're going to be less preoccupied with your own agenda and what's going to happen after that meeting or what happened just before, but actually being present there and having the mental stillness to actually listen.
What I did notice as well is that the resonance of the practice started to diminish. So maybe the first, if we were in a full day meeting, the first hour, hour and a half, there was a different mood in the room, and then that started to dissipate. And the same with, after we ran the 6-week program or 4-week program, that for a month or two after that, there was a lot of resonance and an impact. But then there's a dilution. Could you share a little bit, based on your experience running programs for organization? You spoke before about the sustainability, how to sustain the effort over time when there's no intervention, external intervention.
So first of all, it's important to have the external intervention for a while. So we always do 4 months or preferably up to a year. So we have these 1-year journeys that we are normally implementing. But internal ownership is really important. So training internal champions who are becoming the owners of the program. So it's embedded within the organization and not from outside the organization. So it doesn't have to have a push from the outside, but there's an internal pull that drives that process. I think that's very, very important. Of course, also to have buy-in from the senior management team. So it's really a culture from top down that is being changed, not just a few individuals.
Yeah, makes sense. And that's why I'm pushing it all the time. So we're in Singapore, and many of the people here are operating within Singaporean society, Singapore community, Singapore companies, and the corporate culture here has a unique nature. Can you speak a little bit about maybe some of the distinctions, versus some of the other environments that you've operated in, and what you found to be effective in bringing mindfulness into Singaporean companies or companies based in Singapore?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a great team of people here in Singapore, 6 people, Singaporeans as well. And back to what Jack talked about, these practices, they're coming from the East. We were so lucky to have them imported in the West, and now we are managing to bring it back to the East, which is a bit funny thing. But because they come from here originally, there is some resistance, a lack of resistance that we don't experience in other places of the world, which is people who understand where this comes from. They say, well, this is coming from some kind of religion, perhaps Buddhism, and we really can't have that in our organization. You can't bring religion into an organization. I mean, just imagine bringing a Christian program into Google, or maybe Google wouldn't be a problem. Other companies could be a problem. So that's one challenge that needs to be addressed. And really, you can talk about these as Buddhist practices. They are not Buddhist practices. The Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. He didn't preach Buddhism. He just talked about his own experiences. And that's what mindfulness is about a human experience. So I think it's again about framing it in that context of a human experience. And again, coming back to the business objectives. So we have been working with the Ministry of Education and a number of other local businesses and government organizations, and there's no problem as soon as you have that kind of clarification of where it comes from and what it is.
No, it triggers a thought. I think it was John Kabat-Zinn who shared that meditation is just a truism of the human experience, and it's no more Buddhist than gravity is Italian or British.
Yeah.
And that was something that spoke to me. There's also a big challenge in terms of engagement in organizations today. And Gallup came out with a study recently where 30% of employees are engaged in North America and 16% in many other countries around the world. Do you see a role for mindfulness in terms of creating a higher sense of purpose and connectivity for individuals in their workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I mean, talking to you as a senior executive, if you're thinking about just X% of your employees being engaged, I mean, that's a shocking data, isn't it? I think what we're finding, again, back to this paid reality where our attention is totally under siege all the time, is from a research point of view, our ability to pay attention is declining radically. It's quite shocking to see that our ability to pay attention has just been diminished year by year over the last 20 years. When we're not paying attention, and researchers say nowadays is 46.9% of the time, we're really not present with what we're doing. We're occupied with the past or the future, but not right here. What happens naturally is we lose engagement, we lose meaning in what we're doing. And sharing a story from the first organization we engaged with after that failure experience, at least, because we brought together some business leaders, researchers, and mindfulness masters back then and created the program. And the first program we launched after that was in a large European insurance company. And the sales director, very fast-paced organization, the sales director initiated the program. And he said something like, after 5 months or 5 weeks, he said, I initiated this program expecting that we would become more effective and more clear-minded. That has happened and I'm grateful. And then he said something else. He said, but I experienced another much bigger change. I experienced that we're becoming better human beings. And that to me was a pivotal moment where I knew just we're doing the right thing. It might be that bringing mindfulness into the corporate spaces seems as a little bit of going to the dark side. But when you can train people on a very basic principles and they become better human beings, they become more engaged, yes, more effective, absolutely. But the whole collaboration, the whole experience of meaningfulness in the organization, and we're still working with them now 7 years after, it's just incredible to see how an organization, when they take it in on a large scale, strategically, how that's changing the culture to be better human beings. It's quite beautiful.
So you're in the business of making better human beings. That's something I'll sign up for.
Yeah, I'm not from Google, so I can't say I'm here for world peace. That is what we're here for, but we just can't be so public about it because McKinsey and Accenture and the others we work for, they'll just think we're crazy and they won't engage with us. Yes.
Fantastic.
But so we're in it for spirit, brother.
Okay, so we're coming to an end, and if we want to get really, really practical now and support some of the individuals in the room, when they go back to their workday and their work environment with all the technology, the data, the devices, the intensity of organizational life, what are 1 or 2 simple practices that you would advise people to take back into their corporate space?
Very good question. So our program is a very long one, lots of tips and tools. So what are the best ones? What do you need, guys? Okay, 3 things really quick. One is switch off email notifications. Email notifications is one of the most disruptive things in corporate life nowadays. We work with Microsoft, and when they start to realize how disruptive Outlook is, they started to discuss creating a mindful version of Outlook. It's really interesting. So switching off email alerts and allocating time specifically for doing your emails so that emails is not open all the time and you constantly go back and you become an email addict, which probably most of you are, including most of us up here on stage.
My notifications are off. So.
Good. Another thing is when you have a meeting, just being really practical here, be present. Be present in that meeting. And presence, that's the biggest gift you can give to others. And if I'm not present in a meeting, I'm wasting everyone else's time. If others are not present, they're wasting my time. So I remember in Google when we said to the people, when Jacqueline, she said to people in your team, next time you have a meeting, close your computers and leave them outside. And they went like, what? Yeah, and you can leave your phones out there as well. What are you saying? It was just crazy. But really, if we're all busy with that one, we are not together. So be present in a meeting. And the last thing would be performance breaks, which is such a simple micro practice, which is once every hour, and get any app that will help you to remind to actually do it. Once every hour, do a 45 seconds break. It's just 3 inhalations and exhalations. 1, breathe in, relax. Breathe in, breathe out, focus the mind on the breath. Breathe in, breathe out, clear the mind. And then go back to work again.
Oh, fantastic. All 3 very, very practical. So Rasmus, thank you very much. It was wonderful to share the stage with you and continue all the great work that the Potential Project is doing to make better human beings out there. And my just ask of all of you is to take some of the essence of the work that we've been doing here over yesterday and today, and to just bring some of that back into the organizations that you operate in, and just connect a little bit deeper with yourself, a little bit deeper with the people around you, and take that small step of being more present for those who we interact with on a daily basis. And I think that will start to resonate and hopefully have an impact on the organizations and the people that we engage on a daily basis. So thank you very much. Thank you.